He's young, he's handsome.
They know it.
He's a poet, and many people believe he'll be the next heavyweight champion of the world.
Donald is talking to...
Controversy, not controversy, but there's great interest in the fact that you have joined the Muslim religion. How long have you had this interest, Cassius?
Oh, for the past 6 years, I would say.
Well, it's pretty hard to say because I think that he's going to try to run.
Cassius still having some problems with his eyes. He's blinking.
Sonny Liston is popping off his mouth and making all of these way out statements, and I'm going to put an end to it February 25th, and I don't have to convince nobody now that I am great. They all know it.
Flat-footed stance most of the time. Easy target. Easy.
What if I told you the most iconic photo in sports has a story even more iconic? Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston, and the results of that fight would eventually lead to the arrest of mobsters and gangsters. Sonny's suspicious death a couple years later, rumors of the fight being fixed, Senate committees, gangsters running the sport for decades, a law being made and named after Ali, Mike Tyson going broke, and Floyd Mayweather becoming one of the highest paid athletes of all time. I'm John Lewis, and this is the story of the fight that changed boxing forever. Chapter 1. The Wise Guys. Now, to truly understand how this one fight changed boxing forever, we have to go back 50 years before it. Now, I know the type of people that watch my videos. Chances are you a guy who really enjoys sports and gangster films. And to give proper credit, a lot of the research for this video is from a book called Boxing and a Mob and some other YouTube videos I'll be putting in the description. And with all of that out of the way, I'm sure most of you seen the Robert De Niro movie Casino. In the intro, they talk about this character, Sam Rothstein, who was such a good gambler. He could change the point spread with one bet. Now, that character is based on a real-life gambler, Frank Rothstein. I'm sure he did have some influence, but today we're looking at Arnold Rothstein, who was born 30 years before him, and the actual influence for that character. Arnold Rothstein is known as the father of organized crime in America. He's an OG to such mob legends as Lucky Luciano, Myers Lansky, and Frank Costello. He groomed these men to make money and stay out of the way so cops are not chasing after them. He taught them how to dress, tip servers and valets, but most importantly, instead of having shootouts like the Prohibition days, form organizations that will become different crime families and have sit-downs to keep down the violence and control the black market drug game so you all eat and set a fair price so everyone's not undercutting each other. Arnold was a big gambler, and his number one rule was only bet on a sure thing. Now, that's something you're going to want to remember through this entire video. Back in the early 1900s, horse racing, baseball, and boxing were the biggest sports in America. Arnold was a big fan of horse racing and loved to gamble on it. Well, how do you bet on a sure thing when it involves multiple horses and jockeys? How do you fix a race and make it believable? I'm sure some of you saying, drug the horses, of course. He did that sometimes, but if he couldn't drug the horses, or he was worried that someone would be suspicious, I'm not a horse doctor, but it is ways to see if a horse is drugged. Apparently, he had another tactic called sponging. He would pay a jockey to stick small pieces of a sponge in a horse's nose, thus preventing it from taking in enough oxygen, affecting the outcome, and then discard the sponges after the race. And this portion of the video is sponsored by Aura. Now, hopefully no one watching this ever gets in trouble with the Wise Guys, but some criminals you should worry about are online hackers. The past 12 months, we've heard about major data breaches, and Dell was hacked. 3.9 million people info was stolen. United Health confirmed 100 million users had their data stolen. But most alarming of all, just a few months ago, National Public Data announced they had suffered major breach, potentially impacting every American. The incident compromised over 2.9 billion records used for background checks, including critical personal information such as full name, addresses, date of birth, phone numbers, and most importantly, social security numbers. It has been confirmed that members of the hacker group have released this sensitive information online for free. Thankfully, I feel secure because I use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to alert you about potentially identity theft. They also provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance in case the worst happens. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/John Lewis for a 2-week trial, and that'll be enough time for Aura to see if your data has been exposed. Arnold became such a good gambler, he got banned from racetracks during the week, so he bought his own stable and horses. He was known for being such a good gambler, he had to be secretive about his bets so the lines wouldn't change. He sometimes would have fake bets leak to throw other people off. But that's small stuff. Do y'all really think this would be getting the section if all he did was cheat a few horse races and teach some mobsters how to dress? Arnold will be tied to one of the biggest sports scandals of the 20th century. He helped fix the 1919 World Series. This is back when pro athletes still worked side jobs making wheelbarrows and shit in the off season. So feeling like he wasn't making enough money, Eddie Kikado, the lead pitcher of the White Sox, came up with a plan to throw the World Series in exchange for $100,000 split between 8 players. Looking at the inflation calculator, that's about $1.8 million in future bucks. So Eddie reaches out to the bookie he knows by the name of Joseph Sullivan. Joe agrees, but he has to get Arnold Rothstein on it because Arnold is the only one who has that kind of money on the streets back then.
The dinner was innocent, Counselor, but for dessert, he pitched me on fixing the World Series by bribing the players on the White Sox.
A scheme which you threw cold water upon immediately.
Arnold agrees and the plan is off. All 8 players were supposed to get paid before game 1, but that didn't happen because, well, mob guys aren't too fond of just throwing money all around. Now, just to let you know how famous this event is, it's talked about in The Great Gatsby book and in The Field of Dreams, a movie I've never seen, but my podcast homie Adam Todd Brown described as the best movie ever made revolving around an entire family that's schizophrenic. Before game 1 is played, the pitcher, Eddie Quixote, is like, I don't know about the rest of them, but I'm getting paid or I'm not playing. So he gets his $10,000 first up and proceeds to get lit up. The White Sox lose game 1 like it's planned. White Sox lose game 2, but no one else is being paid and the plan starts falling short. A series of ridiculous events happen. One player named Chick Gandhi gets $10,000 he was supposed to share until the rest of the money comes in, but he decides, I'll bet this money on the Cincinnati Reds to win game 3 to make some extra money. The plan was White Sox win game 3 so that things don't look fishy. White Sox end up winning. He loses all of his money because, of course, he bet on the Cincinnati Reds. At the end of it all, the White Sox lose the World Series. Of the 8 players involved, only 2 received $10,000, 4 got $5,000, and 2 of them didn't get anything at all. The fix was so obvious by game 8. Yes, game 8. It was best of 9 back then. Eventually, an enforcer visited the team and told them lose the series or they'd be swimming with the fishes. Eddie the pitcher gives up 5 runs in the first inning and the White Sox lose 10-5 that game. It doesn't take long for the public to get wise, and eventually Arnold and the players go to court. Arnold beats the charges, but he had to spend a whole lot of money paying off judges and politicians. The lesson he learned is team sports and horse racing have so many variables. All it takes is one person to get mad and start talking. Why not get involved with America's other biggest sport, boxing? In boxing, all you have to do is pay off a boxer or maybe 2 out of the 3 judges. Now, Arnold wasn't the first wise guy, but he was the first one with a major bankroll that can influence a guy to take a dive. If you're a heavy favorite and only going to make, $25,000 a purse for winning, and some guy says, take a dive and I got $100,000 for you, who wouldn't take that, especially back then? And people love a rematch for a huge fight anyway. And that's what happened. When Arnold convinced Jack Dempsey to lose the heavyweight title to Gene Tooney, it said Arthur made $500,000 off of that fight, and the rematch was very controversial. But it turns out his rule of only betting on the sure thing only applied to sports, because he also loved to gamble with his other wise guy friends. Despite being known as one of the richest guys of his time, Arnold was an asshole. Like, you ever meet someone and immediately think, I can't be around them anymore, or I'm going to end up whooping their ass, or worse. Well, Arnold was that guy. Cruising for a bruising. It said he would collect fast and pay his debts very slow. Turns out that's not very ideal when you run with a bunch of criminals with egos. And in 1928, Arnold would meet someone who wasn't having it. After going down $300,000 after a long night of gambling and refusing to pay, Arnold was shot point blank range. But this was 1928 when they had some weak ass Dick Tracy bullets. So Arnold said, good day, called a cab, and died on his way home. Arnold was no more, but word got out how much money could be made in boxing, and that was the beginning of the 40 years of corruption. Chapter 2, the bank run. Everyone now wants in on the boxing hustle, because if you can attach yourself to a guy and he rises up enough, it's serious money to be made. And next up is Abe Attell, a tough-ass Jewish kid from San Francisco. He ran with a gang of teenage jack boys that would rob people in alleys, get in a fight with other crews, normal kid stuff. He eventually landed in boxing to keep him out of the streets, and was the featherweight champ from 1906 to 1912. But that might as well have been the best ping pong player. No one cared about that weight class way back then. But Abe did learn a lot about boxing politics from all that time he spent there. He eventually would relocate to the East Coast and link up with good old Arnold Rothstein, who passed on to him the most important law for wise guys at the time: only bet on a sure thing. Once Arnold died, Abe was able to link up with another wise guy by the name of Oni Madden. The plan was to find someone who looked the part and eventually make him heavyweight champion of the world. So they picked their target, a 6'7" Italian guy that was built like an ox by the name of Primo Carnera. Now, let me pause. Boxing fans are some of the most extreme. I'll have sources for all of this, and the book has even more sources. He did a ton of research. Remember, this is the height of mob influence on sports. All the insiders say way more fights were influenced than the general audience and public even knows about. I'll say all of that because it's still arguments online about how many of Primo's fights were fixed and that he was actually a decent fighter. But it turns out Primo was basically Hulk Hogan, except the part about being really good at putting a believable show on. So fellas and really cool women that watch sports, you ever watch a movie or something and they supposed to be playing football or basketball, and you could tell it's clearly all unathletic actors, like they not running the correct routes? Well, that was Primo. So this guy Oni, who was his manager and in the boxing scene, hooks up with Abe because of his past experience with boxing. It said Primo was so bad in a lot of his fights, anyone familiar with boxing could see the jig. He was clutching when he should have been swinging, ducking when he should have been countering. But despite all of this, Primo was heavyweight champion for a year from 1933 to 1934. That is until his managers came across a man who would not take a dive named Max Baer. So they let Primo fight a real heavyweight, and he got his ass whooped, as you would imagine. They then abandoned the cash cow Primo, and Primo's family says he went to the grave believing he won those fights, despite the wise guys telling him what it was. As for Max, he loses his belt in the very next fight after that to Joe Louis. After this, Abe will be involved with every heavyweight, middle, and welterweight fight through the 1960s. Like, he was Puff Daddy all dancing in the videos at ringside, kicking it with judges. Now, wise guys had made it all the way up to the heavyweight champion. Now it was time to make some real money. So now it's 1940s, and then here comes a guy named Mike Jacobs. And he hooks up with Oni. So you see how all these guys have connections to each other and can pull strings. So Mike J made his money from running numbers and later used that money to start his own production company, putting on shows like plays and concerts and, giant gorillas from Skull Island and a few others that they owned. And they made a company called 20th Century Sports Club out in New York. Now, this is where it becomes some Goodfella shit. Jacobs is obviously mob connected. Jacobs manages Joe Louis, who we just talked about. Joe Louis becomes heavyweight champion. These guys had all kinds of crooked contracts to screw over the fighters' money. Now Jacobs is essentially the heavyweight champion because he controls Joe Louis, and now he controls who gets a shot at the championship. Best believe he made a lot of money doing this, cutting deals in his favor. Remember, these are mob guys who would rob their own mothers for enough money. So boom, it's World War II. Joe Louis does his service like breakdancing and boxing for the troops, and it's saying these niggas are way too famous to die in the military branch, so he serves with Jackie Robinson. Joe Louis comes back to find he owes mad back taxes to the IRS and other creditors, and somehow $250,000 to Jacobs. Of the $4.5 million that Joe Louis made with Jacobs, he only saw $800,000 before taxes. So eventually the IRS seizes Joe's remaining money, and again, Jacobs just drops him. But like I said, he had higher ambitions than robbing boxers blind. So next, Jacobs does a hostile takeover of the production company. I'm assuming by saying something like, I'm Jacobs, this is Oni, and I'm taking over ownership. Take this buyout if you want to live. Now, he controls the entire New York market. You want a fighter on the undercard? Talk to Jacobs. You want to challenge the champ? Talk to Jacobs. Now Jacobs thinking bigger than just selling out arenas. So in 1938, he produced the first fight broadcasted on the radio to huge success. His Friday night fights created an early version of the sports bars. Men would go to the bar, drink, listen to the fight, eat peanuts because no one had invented serving burgers and fries while sports played on the radio. Goddamn idiots. He then moved on to TV where he could sell ads in between every 3-minute round. It just so happened he would make a whole lot more money if the fights went the full 15 rounds, as was standard back then. And don't you know, a lot of the fighters started going the distance, and fighters got a bonus for it. Now, this is still New York City. Jacobs is a rich man with mob connections and power, so it was only a matter of time before the law came for him, or he had to clean up his image. Back then, the wise guys wanted to stay low-key as possible. Only those in the know really knew who was mobbed up. They thought guys like Al Capone were idiots for being famous gangsters. Jacobs' cover was, sure, I know a lot of guys in the mob and deal with them, but that's the only way to make moves in boxing. And help clean up his image, he threw a charity boxing event to raise money for World War II efforts and sold $36 million in war bonds. And after this gesture, as long as bodies wasn't dropping around, he was about as square as you could be. He would later begin getting sick from untreated high blood pressure and sold his company to Madison Square Garden in 1946, and he died in 1953. All right, y'all. We finally about to get to the fireworks factory. That's a reference most of you all won't get. But I had to do all of that legwork so you can understand how deeply entrenched the mob was with boxing. And also for the other documentary nerds like me who just really enjoy a juicy story. So it's the 1950s. Enter Sonny Liston. This brother childhood was worse than Frank Grimes from The Simpsons. Y'all wouldn't believe this shit if an author hadn't written it down.
Abandoned by his parents at age 4, Frank never got to go to school. He spent his childhood years as a delivery boy, delivering toys to more fortunate children.
Sonny was one of 22 children and half-children from his parents and father's first wife. Raised on a farm doing hard labor, no schooling for the first few years of his life. They're not even exactly sure how old he was because everyone didn't get a birth certificate as a baby back then. His father was so abusive, his mother just up and moved with however many children she could afford to run away with on the bus, leaving Sonny and the rest of them with the goddamn Demon King. Sonny would later spend a few months growing fruit, selling it, and saving it for a bus ticket to St. Louis to find his mother. But this was the 1950s, wasn't no Google, and his mother didn't write or call, no doubt in fear of the Demon King finding her. So Sonny catches the bus to St. Louis, and that's his entire plan. The little farm boy had no idea how big St. Louis was. After a couple days, literally just wandering around, asking random people, hey, have you seen Miss Liston? Hey, you know where Miss Liston lives? Police find him sleeping in the alley, take him, feed him, and they actually do find his mother somehow. That would be his last interaction, or his last good interaction with police. His mom enrolled him in school, but he was a big-ass farm boy that's like 4 grades behind. He can't read or write. And not sure how many of you all know this, but kids are jerks. So he did what any kid in that day would do. Dropped out, formed a child gang of stick-up kids robbing houses and such until he was arrested and sent to prison in 1950. Even in prison, he was so big, rarely anyone ever tried him, and it's a story about one guy that did in the book that he just demolished a guy. Definitely, please guys, read this book, go support the author. But because he was this big angry hawk, a priest convinced him to take up boxing as an outlet to control his anger. So the thing about boxing is the heavyweight division, when it's got good competition, will always be the most popular. And it also has somewhat of a hack if you a bigger guy with a strong right or left hand. This would get you a lot further with a lack of skills than lower weight classes. Remember, the 6'7" Italian guy whose whole career was a farce. He actually beat a couple ragdolls on his own after the mob guys left him. Okay, so Sonny Big Ass takes to boxing like a Jets fan takes to losing football games. And the priest helps get him early paroled on the condition he'll leave the streets and take up boxing professionally. Which, I mean, yeah, I get it, but this priest clearly was green as hell because this entire video is literally about the mob running boxing. I don't know what he expected to happen. But Sonny tries to go straight. It's not exactly like the movies and you start making enough money to live it up. So he bounces around for a couple while doing boxing anywhere that will let him make enough money to not starve. And in between fights, he would be the muscle for different wise guys collecting debts, union busting, everything. So eventually, Sonny Liston ends up being managed by this guy named Joseph Barone. Sonny is like LeBron James in the 10th grade. Anyone that knew boxing knew he could be a cash cow in the heavyweight champion. He could box, take a hit, and have power. They wouldn't even have to do that paper tiger gimmick because this is a bunch of criminals. His manager starts selling off parts of his contract like it's Apple or Amazon. Two of the majority owners are these wise guys named Vital and Palmero. A lot of these names I'm saying because if you actually like a big mob fan or historian, these are names you definitely heard of. But I'm just saying all this so everybody understands how deep the mob was connected in boxing. Now, there's a lot of people invested in this man. Next step is get him the hell out of town before police took his life. See, not too long ago, some cop was harassing Sonny and Sonny beat him silly and took his gun. The police took that as an attack on all of them and constantly harassed him. So his team moved him to Philadelphia. So just to recap, we got big ass angry black man with mob ties who's a felon and basically run out of his last city for beating up a cop. And this is now the 1960s during the Civil Rights era. So take Colin Kaepernick kneeling, multiply it by Caitlin Clark rookie season in the WNBA, and add in O.J. Simpson trial. That's how political it was at this time for athletes. In case you think I'm underplaying it, the iconic Black Power fist picture was taken 6 years later in the Olympics. So it's 1962, and if you're the heavyweight champion of the world, especially if you're American, you're basically a global icon. And see, everything about the Civil Rights era was planned. It was all PR to accomplish the bigger goal. And I'm sorry to the one person who clicked on the video with Muhammad Ali as a thumbnail and expected me to not get political at any point. Now, if boxing had just been a regular sport, these men would have fought years earlier. But not only was the mob controlling things, we had something else at play. Politics. John F. Kennedy, the president of the United States at the time, the NAACP, white liberals in support of the fight, and Martin Luther King Jr. were all against Sonny Liston getting a world championship fight because they wanted Floyd Patterson as the champion. While they out doing sit-ins and speeches and freedom walks, Floyd Patterson is what friend of the channel Little Bill described as one of the good blacks. It's actually not anything necessarily bad with being one of the good blacks. They just move in a way that doesn't make white people uncomfortable. They say the right things, look the part, while Malcolm X at the same time wanted to help make the fight. I can't go into all the details, but Malcolm still had ties to the underworld from before he converted to the Nation of Islam. So we've got all of this going on. Floyd Patterson, he didn't like Malcolm X or the Nation. He thought it was a cult and made it be known. Thing is, Sonny Liston didn't like them either. He just straight up thought it was weird. He's like, no liquor, no pork, no sex before marriage. I don't like that. They controlling my life. He thought they brainwashed people, but he didn't let that out publicly. So during all of this, Sonny's two main handlers, Carbo and Palmer, go on trial for racketeering and other mob shit and sent to prison. And everyone like, see, we told you about that nigga. But it didn't matter. By this time, the entire country is tired of waiting. They demanding a fight. Promoters and advertisers are basically begging for Patterson versus Liston. So now Sonny has a new manager who has mob ties, a lawyer by the name of Roy Cochran. And I mean, come on, guys. Even wise guys deserves a fair trial. The fight is finally set to happen September 25th, 1962. Who's going to win? Sonny's raw power or Patterson's speed and defense? They have a sold-out stadium. It's on radio and TV broadcasts. The streets and working-class black people, they want Sonny to win. And the bourgeoisie blacks, they want Patterson to win. They open up the first round pretty aggressive. Right, left, right. Sonny knocks Patterson down. His legs turn to noodles. He's not getting up. He can't beat the 10 count. Sonny Liston wins the fight in the first round in 2 minutes and 6 seconds. But the thing about boxing, when it comes to the champ, it's almost always a rematch clause and more money to be made. So the rematch is now scheduled for July 27th, 1963. To a lot of Americans, Sonny is still seen as the man not deserving of the championship. He's booed on his ring walk. And again, you guys have to understand, the heavyweight championship might as well have been like a seat of political office at a time when that really meant something. But it's another slaughtering. Sonny wins the first round in like 2 minutes again. He's really like that. But now a new challenger has entered. Muhammad Ali, who's going by Cassius Clay this time. He enters the ring yelling about how pretty he is, how he's the greatest, how he's going to whoop Sonny, and he's up for the next championship fight. Two things Ali knew: how to market himself and how to box. While Liston may have been disliked by parts of America because he was a felon with mob ties, all of that was in the past. He served his time. The mob people, they were in jail, and also that part, it was just all part of the game. Some people had to exist. And he was a bit of a shy man, and that was seen as a Negro who not knew how to behave himself in mixed company. So by the second fight, he really wasn't making too many people uncomfortable. He won his fight, he did his little interviews, and out of sight, out of mind. While Cassius Clay, on the other hand, he was a young loudmouth, and parts of America wanted to see him be humbled. He was disrespecting the sport. But the thing about history is they often leave out the streets and the youth opinion. No doubt Clay had the young fan base who grew up watching older boxers with their dads and uncles. Now they had Clay, the loudmouth whose pre-fight interviews were must-watch TV. He was the face of the rebellious youth culture of the time.
I'm ready to go to war right now.
Well, when you say you're ready to go to war right now...
If I see that barrel in the street, I'll beat him before the fight.
You'd actually take him on before the fight?
Beat him like I'm his daddy.
I saw Sonny Liston a few days ago, Cassius.
Ain't he ugly?
He...
He's too ugly to be the world's champ. The world's champ should be pretty like me.
Well, he told me to bet my life that you wouldn't go 3 rounds.
Well, if you want to lose your money, then bet on Sonny.
Even with all of that, Liston was favored to win by knockout. I mean, his hands were huge. They measured around 14 inches wide. They were built like stones. He could take punches. Clay was still pretty, and he was still pretty young, too. He hadn't really been tested in the ring yet. But no matter the outcome, this was the next must-see fight. It was scheduled for February 25th, 1964. While Clay was an 8-1 underdog, at 22 years old, he hadn't even hit his prime yet. While Sonny Liston was listed as 32 because, remember what I said, he didn't have a birth certificate as a baby. Historians estimate him being closer to 35 years old at the time of this fight. Not only was he at the age most boxers slow down or retire, he had only fought 3 times since 1961 for a grand total of 7 minutes because he was getting them knockouts. He had bad shoulders, requiring cortisone shots, and generally he just wasn't training very much. while Clay was training like Goku on his way to Planet Namek to beat the Ginyu Force clown ass.
He's right off to your left side. What about it?
Sonny might be great, but he will leave in 8. If he want to go to heaven, I'll get him in 7. He'll be in a worse fix if I cut it to 6. If he keeps talking jive, he'll go in 5.
The thing about boxing is that they often leave out is the general audience are normally just casual, as they just hear a turn. As I write this, the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight happened. Those like me who watch boxing knew exactly how it was going to go. But the general audience, for some reason, expected 1990s Mike Tyson to travel through a time machine. Now, you got to remember, back then, matches were scheduled for 15 rounds. Either Sonny was going to end it early or he'll be in trouble because Clay has stamina on his side. It's the first 2 rounds. Liston is aggressive. He's on Clay ass. They trade blows. Liston is solid. Clay was never known to be this knockout king, but Liston connected a couple times and Clay was able to shake him off. So far, he'd never seen anything like this. Usually, when he made a good connection, the person went down. What the hell is going on? It's now round 3. Liston is looking like he's slowing down already. Then Clay throws a jab that cuts Liston under his eye. This is the first time Liston has ever been cut in his entire boxing career. Does this corner even know how to treat this in between rounds? Clay rope-a-dope is working. Liston is throwing wild swings. He lands on Clay midsection, but Clay, he built for it tough. They don't slow him down whatsoever. The fight's not supposed to go like this. Liston is the baddest man walking the earth at this time. Now here's where things get weird. And also you can impress your pops or granddad, who no doubt remember this if they watched boxing back in the day. It's not the Phantom Punch, but just as controversial. As the bell rings in the end of round 4, Clay's in the corner and he starts complaining to his corner that his eyes are burning like he has a bleach or something in it. His corner man splashes water in Clay's faces and uses his finger to dab his own eye, and it starts burning instantly. Till this day, we don't know if Sonny was aware, but someone in his corner rubbed a substance on his gloves and it got in Clay's eyes that caused Clay to fight an entire round basically blind. Clay was ready to throw in the towel. His corner assumed him. He may never get another shot at the title if he quit in the biggest fight of the decade. So Clay spends the entire 5th round playing defense, using his arms to keep Liston at bay and his speed to dance around the ring. If you didn't know better, I wouldn't blame you for thinking this entire section was out of a Hollywood movie, because now it's round 6. Clay can see and he's mad as a rabid dog for Liston trying to cheat him. He has the stamina and power. He beats Liston ass the entire round up and down the ring. Clay clearly won round 6 and he's built to go all 15 need be. Liston is tired. The bell for round 7 rings. Clay runs to the center. Sonny doesn't move. He quits. Cassius Clay wins by technical stoppage. Did Liston quit because he knew his body couldn't make it and didn't want his legacy to end with a knockout? Did the wise guys see what was happening and make a late call? Was his body actually too broken to continue? We never actually find out.
This is the city.
You're winning the championship. You feel your affiliation with the Muslim religion, being a follower of the Muslim religion, had something to do with your winning the championship?
Well, I would say so. My religion is the only thing that I can give me credit for pulling me through, because 99 out of 100 seemed to see no possibility of me winning. The newspaper reporters and everybody all over the world condemned me. They said it would be a mismatch, and couldn't nobody believe it.
And if you thought the first fight had political undertone, oh buddy, you ain't seen nothing yet. Clay had already had public relationships with the Nation of Islam, also known as the Black Muslims. In a month after winning the heavyweight belt, he officially converts to Islam and changes his name to Muhammad Ali, which I'll be referring to him as. I use both names just so you can all understand how the media flipped and also that timeline. They could literally make an entire movie about these 2 fights. And please, again, read the book I used for a lot of this research, because it's a ton I'm leaving out. But check it. The fight is scheduled for May 1965. Just 3 months earlier, in February, Malcolm X was assassinated. And word on the street is the Nation of Islam was behind it. And now rumor is they told Liston to lose this fight or he would lose his life. And also his wife had been kidnapped on the night of the fight. Because the Nation, they can make a whole lot of money if they own the heavyweight champion. And these aren't just some rumors. So as big as this rematch was, no one wanted to host it because of Ali's affiliation with the Nation of Islam. Not only the rumors of them being involved in Malcolm X's death, but it's the civil rights era, and they talking about white devils, and we need to keep the races divided, along with an entire orange branch called the Fruit of Islam, or the FOI. They was just doing too much. So Miami, Vegas, and New York, the big hubs, all refused to host the fight. They finally find a venue in Maine, of all places. For my non-American viewers, Maine is one of those states so small the average American can't even point it out. Like, it's so small, we just group it together with like 5 other tiny states and call it New England. That's why the New England Patriots have that name. That's not actually a real city. I don't know, it's weird. I didn't make it up. So the fight's in tiny ass Maine. Now, box office won't be breaking any records. The only money to be made will be made off of gambling and closed circuit TV, which was their version of pay-per-view. See, up into the 80s, boxing didn't really make crazy money off of their fight purses. Now, this is when the Phantom Punch happens. Going into it, Ali was a heavy underdog once again, despite everything that they seen. But like I said, most boxing fans that only watch big fights are casuals. Meaning, if you bet on Ali, you would make at least 4 times your money if he won. So, allegedly, the night of the fight, Liston could not get in touch with his wife before the fight, and the NOI had been holding her hostage. Now, this is the most iconic fight from one of the biggest rematches in boxing. So I want you to take a guess. What round do you think Ali knocks out Liston? Yes, I spoiled it, but you clearly seen a photo. That in that photo, they're saying Ali is screaming, "Get up, you bum." That iconic photo. So let's rewind while you take your guesses. So the two men walk to the center of the ring. Round 1 starts. They dance around, sizing each other up for a minute. They throw a couple punches that miss. Ali throws a right hand that glazes Liston, and Liston goes down like it was a Tyson shot. The referee was a retired boxer by the name of Joe Watko. He's almost done because he knows what a KO shot looks like. It's chaos. He has to get Ali to a neutral corner. Liston is doing his best to slowly stumble and not make the 10 count, but he really can't act forever. So he finally stands up. And if I'm able to share the video and not get copyright claim, you all will see what I'm talking about. But if I can't share it, what you'll see is they actually start fighting again for a few seconds. The ref, he walks off, comes back, and stops the fight. That's because the time judge is telling him that no, Liston is counted out. He's like 5 seconds past the 10 count. Ali wins by knockout. The crowd in attendance knows what they just seen and instantly starts screaming, "Fix, fix, fix," demanding refunds, but it's too late. Nobody will get a refund, and Ali is still the champion. If you pull up old newspapers, many sport writers and attendants believe the fight was fixed. Liston later would tell Sports Illustrated in the interview he took a dive. He was afraid he'd be shot in the ring if he stood up before the 10 count. And this isn't just paranoia. They got Malcolm X in a room full of people, so his fears was believable. Even the FBI says it was fixed, according to an investigation into the mob. Even in the black community back then, it was common belief that the fight was fixed. This actually didn't become taboo to say until Ali went through the whole refusal to be drafted into the army thing, and he became a black icon. After that loss, Liston would go 15-1 in his career. His last fight would be June 1970. In January 1971, Liston's wife returned home from a 2-week visit with her family, finding Liston's dead body rotting. Police would eventually rule it as a heroin overdose. Heroin, I'm sorry, I say it weird. I know some of y'all won't know what the hell I'm talking about. It's still rumors about his death because some say it was because he refused to take a dive in a different fight. Others say it's because he was threatening to go public about the Ali fight years ago if he didn't get more money from the mob. So It's said that the 1965 Ali versus Liston second fight will be the last big score for the Wise Guys. This one had drawn so much attention. Also, movies were already being made about the corruption. Some brave columnists wrote articles about boxing contenders who never got title shots because they weren't managed by Wise Guys or wouldn't play by those guys' rules. You see, entry-level boxing was corrupted. You had to play by the rules to move up, get ranked, make real money, and get title fights. Just how many high-profile fights had some level of corruption, we'll never know. But according to insiders, way more than the general public even assumes. So by the 1970s, the U.S. government, they was fed up with these mob guys, their sport corruption, controlling unions, all the gunplay, all of that stuff raw. So they enacted RICO law, effectively crippling the mob and all organized crime. They locked up a lot of their muscle. They made it easier to prosecute all levels of the organization. While that destroyed the mob's ability to form statewide monopolies and rob boxers blind, as we talked about in the intro, that wasn't the end of the corruption. That takes us to chapter 3, the fall off. So multiple things pushed the mob and organized crime out of boxing by the end of the 1960s, but by the 1990s, the prize money had gotten so big, the feds were worried the Wise Guys would make a return to get a taste. Thanks to big names like, of course, Mike Tyson. So a Senate committee is formed to investigate, and the star witness is the world's most famous snitch, Sammy the Bull. I told y'all, that one photo had a crazy story. You can find the full hearing online, but what Sammy explains is that by the 1960s, the mob had mostly already left boxing. It was other quicker ways to make money, like the drug trade, but mostly controlling unions and construction in big cities like New Jersey and New York. Also, by the 1990s, it was impossible to make money fixing fights. That would be worth all that work of investing years into a fighter before he gets a title shot, because the word was out and no books would take more than a couple grand on an underdog, you see. So now Sammy says, to his knowledge, the family he was aligned with weren't involved because it was just too much work. But if any Wise Guys were to get involved, what they would do is sign the boxer to a manager with mob ties so that they get a piece of everything. Tie them to a bad contract, they can make up all type of junk fees and training, managing, etc., etc. And by this point, if a fighter wanted to walk away, it's fine because he would be in the red, owing money, and unable to make any big fights anyway. All of this was way easier than attempting to fix big fights and harm those who didn't want to play the game because, you know, violence tends to draw the police. Which brings us to Don King, who has clearly made some deal with the devil as he's still alive at 94 years old. He was raised in Cleveland and became one of the most successful number runners of that time. You see, running numbers was the unofficial lottery of the streets before the government had a legit one. He didn't use that money to open up a nightclub in Cleveland. This man beat 2 different murder charges. He then has a mutual friend introduce him to Muhammad Ali. And Don King puts together an exhibition fight with Ali and sells 81,000 tickets in his first ever promotion. He then uses his silver tongue and tells Ali, "Oh, us black folks, we need to stick together." And he steals Ali from Bob Arnum and his team of all white managers he had at the time. With talks of black excellence, Don then successfully puts on the Rumble in the Jungle as his first real fight promotion. He promises Ali and George Foreman $5 million each, and everything he says actually does happen. The fight made $100 million in pay-per-view buys. He then puts on an even bigger fight, the Thriller in Manila. Ali versus Frazier makes crazy money, and he pays the fighters well. So after this, Don King's name is set in stone as the promoter to get with if you want to make real money. And he works with such legends as Leon Spinks, Sugar Ray Leonard, and of course, Mike Tyson. But the thing about Don King is, you will make more money getting ripped off by Don King than you would with any other promoter doing it square. Like after the Thriller in Manila, a concussed Ali still in the hospital, he only got 6 of his promised $8 million. Also, Don King had a Nation of Islam member show up to the hospital with $50,000 in a suitcase, talk Ali into signing a contract, giving King control of all of his future promotions and dropping the lawsuit for the rest of the money. All right, so skip forward. Now it's 1988, and Mike Tyson, original trainer and managers have passed away. The men that got him off the streets, they broke and rebuilt him into a heavyweight champion. So Don meets Mike at his manager's funeral and snakes his way into his life and becomes his new manager. So now Mike, the shy kid, is now hanging with rappers, celebrities, and he's bigger than ever. He's also partying and doing drugs basically 24/7. Eventually, Tyson finds out that Don King owns his likeness rights and gets 30% of all earnings, including his short-lived stint in the WWF in the 90s. As you can guess, Mike is pissed, so he files a lawsuit. But thanks to bad money management, Mike has to settle that lawsuit for $14 million just to pay off his debts during his first bankruptcy. Now, because I'm sure some real boxing heads watching this, I have to mention, it is rumored Don King paid off a judge in the Holyfield versus Lennox Lewis fight because of a controversial scoring with one judge. You see, not only was King a promoter, he was also a manager. And finally, after years of fixed fights, managers robbing fighters blind, the feds passed something that's known as the Muhammad Ali Act that says promoters and managers cannot be the same person. Reason being, they have two different jobs. So I'll break it down like this. Let's say friend of the channel, Little Bill, is a boxer. If I'm his manager, my interest is make his career last as long as possible. So I'm going to get him tune-up fights I think he'll match up well against and, move him up slowly to get him a belt title. Set his career up as best as I can. While the promoter job is to make as much money as possible for one event and then another and another. That can mean having Bill fight someone way above his skill level that could possibly end his career early. And because of that, elite boxers make way more money, especially compared to UFC fighters, the only other sport that's remotely close to it. Because of this law and the fact that boxing doesn't have a governing body or an organization like the NBA, it causes promoters to bid driving up the money. Or look at it this way. Let's say Lil Bill is now 20-0, he has 15 knockouts. Now the fans want to see him fight FT Signifier, who's 30-0 with 20 knockouts. Now, if they were both UFC fighters, the company has no incentive to give them a major payday because they signed with UFC and they can't just walk away from their contract like that. Now, if they're both boxers, they're basically their own companies, and once they agree to fight each other, the big promotion companies can bid to host that fight. You got Top Rank, PBC, Golden Boy Promotions, Mayweather Promotions, on top of selling ad space on their boxing trunks and negotiation splits on pay-per-view sales. And that's why, even though UFC seems bigger, they always trying to get these boxing matches like Conor McGregor did a couple years ago against Floyd Mayweather. Despite all the controversies, globally, boxing is still alive and healthy. The mob has been kicked out. While it'll always be some shady things going on, the fighters are richer, safer, and have laws on their side. And if you like to see me do another